Zach Version, Seco Consulting.
Alden Third. Pete Peterson.
Anybody on the phone? Thank you.
Eric Croft. And Steve.
Forrest Dunbar.
Ellery Johnson.
Dick Trey.
John Middleton.
And a new audience, please.
Ken Franco, SAP. Mike Chadwick, Internal Audit.
Rose Goley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Matt Johnson, SAP.
Karen Carson, Regulations. Rosella Young, OAC.
Thank you, Rosella. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm back. So this is sort of the last report of the year. A lot of it's going to repeat some things that Alden has already told you, although some of his information is more current in the sense that he has some updates in mind. A couple of mine are from yesterday. So let's talk about the progress. I think the key thing, and this is just a page that we presented to you last month. Nothing has really changed. So the bottom line is everybody recognizes and the team recognizes that they've got a lot of work to get done by next Friday. And their entire focus is on that, and that is appropriate. This is a page out of their progress report that they presented in their project management office meeting yesterday. It was the first page. I mean, again, everybody recognizes that the whole focus has to be on get ready for strategic systems integration testing, which is SIT, first cycle. Okay, so that's the focus, and that's appropriate. Again, this is something you saw me in. This one is 1 day out of date now. There's the 206 total objects, RICE objects that everybody needs to get completed so that they are prepared for integration testing. The good news is that a little bit over 50% are all ready to go. That's the good news. You've still got quite a long list in defect repair. That's, in my mind, that's worrisome. You need to pay attention to it. Yeah, there are 10 that are now, and I noticed that in Alden's report, he said there were 9. So that means that one of them got out of that category. But that's the concern. I mean, that the odds of getting those all ready for for systems integration testing is low. But if they're all reports, that's probably going to be okay. This is a page out of the project management office progress report yesterday. 3 of the major items are all focused on the issue of getting things ready for the 12/23 deadline. There is one line item in there that I think is important. We need to recognize that there is a concern about the munis of staff availability coming up in the next 6 months, and that's appropriate. They should be concerned about it and should be taking some action. So we talked earlier, Alden talked about data. Well, here's the list of the files. I mean, I just highlighted the 2 that are the furthest away from being complete in red, just to say that's the kind of detail that that we should be paying attention to. Okay, we should not be looking at, that's the only way you're going to get a good handle and be able to come back to the project team and say, well, what about that one? Okay, so you need to be asking for that kind of detail, in my opinion. Same thing here. This is the test script issue. Yes, sir.
Just back to the other one. So, I mean, does everything have to be 100% to go live, or were there some of those?
For data, you bet.
Okay, so everything on
Not for live, not for go live, for testing. For integration testing. In other words, you can't really test if you don't have the standard list of all the vendors, all the employee numbers. I mean, you got to have that information there in order to accomplish the test. Okay, so yeah, they do have to get it done. And I think, as Alden said, pretty good chance it's going to happen. Pretty good chance that by next Friday they'll have the data. Okay, which was a concern earlier. They picked up. The folks that are working on data have been working a lot of long hours.
I just noticed time management was on there.
Serious one, absolutely.
I've gotten along without that for 58 years.
But in terms of integration testing, payroll is not going to operate unless you've got that stuff in place. Okay. So here's the test script thing. Just showing you that, again, this is the level of detail that makes sense to be paying attention to. It's 1 page. You ought to be able to see which ones are in trouble, which ones are not in trouble, and the ones who've got late dates. I mean, this is as of yesterday. Okay? And so they're missing some dates. I mean, and I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, it's due on 11/30? That's 2 weeks ago. Okay, so that's a concern. The interfaces, there are total, for integration testing, there are a total of 58 interfaces that need to be in place in order to accomplish integration testing for cycle 1. Good news, 28 of them are ready. Worrisome, got some defects, got some problems, got some programming that's going on, corrections and fixes that are going on. And then, oh, by the way, we've still got some that are being developed. Okay, so there are 9 of them that are still being developed.
Mr. Weddleton?
So we've seen last month or so contracts with the utilities to pay people to get their connections to SAP. Is that some of these are utilities?
Power plant, for
Yep,
example,
yep.
your team budget. Those
Exactly
are,
right.
those
That's
are,
counted.
those, and remember, some of those got some late jumps and a lot of work, and those are massive ones, and obviously those downstream impacted the project.
And if they're not ready in July, we can't.
Well, everything has to be ready for
In July.
We're just trying to meet.
This is all getting ready for-
December 23rd.
Yeah.
One at a time would be good.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Same thing.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Mr.
These are all for December 23rd, is that's sit one you'll see constantly. Yes, Mr. Wellen, everything has to be ready for go live, but even more importantly, we'll be even more aggressive. Everything has to be ready for situation set 2. So it's well in advance of go live, but there are a few items that we could wait with, and then the other thing which is also negatively impacting us, certain things have changed. We have a new life insurance vendor, that just happened, a new state report of Alaska reporting for retirement, that just happened, and unfortunately, they cost us more money, they hurt our project, but vendors change as we're going, and unfortunately, the project just has to go along with those, and those are, I don't want to say anybody's fault, those are just normal project type things that have happened, and we will have those, some in development, third-party testing are the ones that were not intentionally left behind, but are just happened, and we're working through them as fast as we can.
Anything else, Mr. Weddleton?
Thank you.
Please continue.
So, last month we talked about the impending checkpoint. That's next Friday. I mean, that's the target date, that's the date that Alden is expected to, in essence, sign off. That's just a repeat of the statements that we made a month ago. That has not changed. That is a fairly major contractual activity that Alden has to accomplish next Friday. So that's all we're trying to kind of remind everybody about that. In other words, nothing's really has changed. Just as a bottom line, I want to remind you that you got to sign off on the RISIS. Those are all those objects, interfaces, reports, conversions. That's what those letters mean. It has to be ready for system integration testing cycle 1 on Friday the 23rd. MOA being Alden, also must sign off on the balance of those that are not ready. Everybody needs to agree that that's the situation, that's what has to be done as we go forward, and theoretically, most of those need to be ready for integration testing cycle 2. And since they're saying that basically the plan is that it's 5 weeks for every integration cycle test, so you're looking at 5 weeks after the beginning of January is when cycle 2 would probably start. And then you've got all of those are 5 weeks. I mentioned that. So the other thing I think we need to be aware of, and I think Alden mentioned this as well, if everything goes forward and you can start your integration testing right away on 12/24, then the folks in India don't usually celebrate Christmas. So I would imagine that they might actually be able to get some work done.
Mr. Theron?
Just one little caveat here, this is not his fault for knowing this, but our testers are in Mexico actually for SIT testing, which is important because, as I mentioned before, we're having problems with the 16.5-hour delay. When we get into testing, SAP is having them on the same hours as the municipality of Anchorage. So that's the only reason why I bring up the testing. At least we'll be able to have real-time type thing, and hopefully not the time lag we've had on the development side.
They do something.
Thank you.
On that note, I would tell you that that last statement then is incorrect. As I would think that the folks in Mexico probably are celebrating the holidays.
There are time differences in that.
And
Time differences, yes, but they are very Catholic.
if we make the 23rd, I've already checked with SAP, we will have the testers work the 3 days after the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of that week to get a jump on SID testing. So if we don't make the date, then probably not.
Thank you.
Okay?
Please continue.
Along those lines, I took a look at the contract, the SAP contract on page 20. On page 20, the SAP contract. So this chart right here is actually taken from page 20. So that was the plan. That was the estimated schedule. Project startup was going to be 2 weeks. Realization build, which is programming and development, which is what we're trying to wrap up right now, is 26 weeks. Realization testing is the systems integration testing. That's 15 weeks. That's the three cycles times 5 weeks. Preparation for go live and user acceptance testing. That's what UAT means. It's 9 weeks. And then go live support is actually after July. Okay? So I just thought we ought to take a look at reality. And project initiation took almost 4 weeks. Realization build, if you count from the beginning of May until next week, is 30 weeks. That's what actually happened. Okay? I don't know what's going to happen going forward. Right now, everybody thinks that we're going to do 15 weeks for a realization test. I don't know what's going to happen with preparation, final preparation of UAT. And I think we need to remind ourselves that according to the contract, SAP will provide consultation after post-go live. They will not provide staff. Okay? According to the contract. So is the MOA getting ready? And I think, we've talked before about how important change management is, and how important organization change management is, and needing a champion and all those kind of comments. So how are we doing? And I think the key here, and I think it's interesting that when in yesterday's project management office meeting of the team, the only team that was talking about the fact that they're in pretty good shape is change management. Okay? So they finally got some staff, good for them. They've come up with what all the learning events are going to be, what the training schedule is looking like. We had talked earlier about 2 months ago about tremendous, the change impact assessment, that there were a lot of policy changes, if you recall. Well, those are now being viewed much more as being potential or possible policy changes. They're working very diligently and working that out and finalizing that. And they're discovering that several of those potential policy changes really affect one policy, so it's becoming compressed as to how many policies are actually going to have to be changed. That's good news. Okay, that's good news. The other thing I think is that there was a thought that there were going to be some contract changes. So again, the Muni has got people looking at that. They've taken a close look at that and have resolved and have decided that there will be no contract changes, that anything that's coming out of this can be handled with notifications, which is also good news. Okay? So with regard to getting ready, preparing from a learning perspective, the curriculum's been drafted. Everybody knows, they now know what their delivery methods are going to be. So they're going to be doing some of this stuff via the web. They're going to be doing a good portion of it is going to be instructor-led, whether it's virtual or classroom. There are going to be some quick reference guides, and there's going to be some simulation. So this has all been worked out, and that's good news. And we are taking a train-the-trainer approach. So there are going to be representatives from the community that will actually be taught how to be a trainer, and then they will actually conduct training. Okay? Pilot training session is an approach that they're using right now. There's been good feedback so far. They've actually had 2 pilot training sessions this week. Okay? Most of the development material, in other words, they've got to actually create all the tests and the PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. That's on the web pages. I mean, that's all got to be developed yet. So that'll be going on in January, February, March. The trainers that will be doing the training will be trained themselves in March. and then the training itself will take place in April, May, June. I talk about that because some of these things, when you start looking at it, you start seeing how many of these sessions are going to be. You know, you start realizing that it's going to have an impact on uni staff. It's going to have an impact on uni staff. So there's about 84 learning curriculum, learning categories or learning sessions. Over half of them will be instructor-led. 30 will have a quick reference guide that needs to be prepared along with simulations. And 11 of those 84 are going to be self-learning via the web. So I thought you'd make some sense to kind of see some of these significant courses. I mean, so we've got this whole navigation, how do I get around and how do I use the system? Well, those apply to everybody. So what is it, 2,000 employees? Is that
About 2,700.
2,700, okay. So 2,700 employees need to go through 2 hours of SAP graphical user interface training. Okay, start calculating what this is in terms of staff hours and cost and time. The business warehouse, how to do reporting, it's everybody, 2,700 times 2 hours. Okay, then you get to, this is the, how do I use web? How do I actually use the web classroom? That's 1 hour, times 2,700. Then there's benefits processing, 16 hours of training.
I have a question.
Sure.
Not a question, a comment, okay? On some of this training, all 2,700 employees are not gonna be needed to do all
I'm
the
just
training.
going by what they have put in their plan.
So then let me.
I agree with you 100%.
So that might need to be made.
I've been making some faces here. I'm not saying that a police officer doesn't need to have business.
Exactly.
I mean, that is included in the number. But all these classes are legitimate. They are going, an exercise that they are doing is called role mapping. So they are actually going to know what every person's job is and what their role is. And then on those 84 classes, they will be assigned what is applicable to the role that they have to perform. Some might be just time and attendance and benefits, how I put my leave requests in. Some might be their entire job on how to do purchasing. But the role mapping piece, which is critical, and that department leads it, will determine which class every single employee has to take. It's applicable.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That was my point exactly. Mr. Training?
Alden, can we get IT to tell us how many computers are not hookable to SAP before we get to the time where we turn the system on? I want to know ahead of time how many computers we've got to fix.
Mr. Training, the IT director is here. If you would like to answer that question.
I want the answer to the question.
So,
Could you move up a little bit?
sure. Mr. Trainee, through the chair, Ms. Jackson, Secretary Jackson, all our computers will be able to access SAP either through the web or through the client, except for a few that are not going to be web enabled. An example may be if they are using an application that only runs on XP as an example, and there's a security concern with XP, so we have walled off that application, that device from the internet, and there's just a few of them. There's a few meaning there's less than 20, 25 or so, and some of them are in fire trucks and other instances where they're using some very specific applications. So there'll be a very few handful of devices in the entire organization that will not be accessing the internet. Those devices will technically not be able to access SAP. But for the purpose of the 2,700 users that are going to be using it, all of them will be able to access SAP.
Because that's not what Alden was telling me when we started off this meeting. He said he's running into that. Alden, you were saying some don't hook up.
Especially with the SAP GUI, if they talk about SAP GUI and the ability to have programs to be able to get into their computer into the system.
So I'm not what you're really talking about.
All I'm saying is that and one of the departments I was talking with was fire, so I don't know if that was specifically related to what's always concerned with. But as I've gone around and done presentations, a couple of them have had concerns about their computers. I know there was a big purchase last year to try to help with some of that the assembly approved the money for. But I have individual people eventually coming up to me and saying that they don't believe their computers will be able to access the internet and or have security issues to be able to do it.
So one, I'm going to ask you to give me updated information on that, specifically who, where, how. I need that specifically. Because if the data is a year old, we put in 1,300 new machines in the last year. So again, I need to know specifically from you, because I've not heard that before, so I need that information specifically. But I do not believe that there are devices out there that should not be able to access SAP. There's two ways of accessing SAP. One is through SAP GUI, which is a client which is installed on a machine. And the second one is through a web browser, which is accessing through the internet. So I would love to be able to see exactly who this audience is that cannot access SAP through either of those mechanisms.
Thank you. I'll be asking you again.
And then
because
you and
as we-
Larry can have a conversation offline.
As we go to this, I want to make sure they've got the ability to get trained on these machines. If the machines don't get there, it defeats the purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome to training, please continue.
Well, every month we do talk about what the running costs are, and there were some questions about the running costs. If you recall, Mr. Dunbar, I believe you asked a question, didn't you, about the running costs? These are the running costs by month, okay? By month. And these are based on a summarization of all the time reports, times the rates for every individual, plus their expense reports. So it's in essence what's been charged by the contractors to the project. The contract that you agreed to with SAP started in April. Okay, so all I did was say, okay, this is what's been expended. I added them all up and I get $12,323,288. Your SAP contract is round numbers 13.5. Okay, now, because
Through November or through end?
through November is the actual expenditure, not expenditures, because you haven't paid a lot of bills. I mean, but that's what's been charged by the contractors based on their time reports to this project, and that's the total. But then the contract, the SAP contract, has a number in there for services and for expenses. And I rounded, but it's about 13.5, and that takes you through the end. Supposedly through the end of the project. That is correct, through the end of the project.
Mr. Call?
Yeah, that was the question, thank you.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
So that's an anomaly. And then down there, you can see weekly run rate is averaging. Yes, the more recent weeks are pretty close to $500,000, but over the last quarter, they're averaging about $350 a week. And they will drop back down again later on in 2017 as you start having less and less developers involved. Okay, but right now you're at pretty much at a peak.
Mr. Dunlap?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
Maybe I can just explain a little bit more detail here. Zig's run rate there is while it's accurate, there's a variety of things that go into that. First off, the SAP number, the actual number of SAP, Peloton, and the other resources is 17.8 is the cost of the entire contract. That is just the SAP piece. But the run rate that he has there is all consultants across all of our different vendors that we have. And I also paid for a portion of SAP's resources through a totally different contract, but the money is showing up on the left, but the funding source is another different area. So if you're looking at saying we're almost close to our 13.5, that is not the case. There's a whole bunch of variety of things on that left-hand column that those are the actual numbers, but the funding of those and the actual amounts and so forth are different. It's not, we're not like running out like right now. Don't get that that item right there. Does that make sense? Hopefully
Tomorrow?
no.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
That was my question.
Thank you, Mr.
I can
Mr.
see
Pearson,
the-
did I see that you had a question? Okay, did you have a question, Mr. Dunbar? Thank you. Please continue.
So the cost of, and I haven't really put, you've got the project cost to date information that you got from Alden. I mean, it's still running in arrears, you're still not getting all of the internal personnel charges, still haven't paid a lot of SAP bills, so it's still running in arrears.
So I have a question, and it's to Mr. Thurman. So the SAP bills that aren't being paid, is it still the same issue because you're taking time reviewing them like you should?
Yes, ma'am. We have still about $6.5 to $7 million of invoices that are not paid currently, because there are challenges, and they will be the first to admit that their invoicing system is horrible. I had the head of delivery last night, and everybody there, they know it. We have been making limited progress. For example, this week we did pay $200,000, but that's a small number. There are some substantial ones that are, upwards of millions of dollars, $1.5 million. So if we ever get one of those done, you'll see a big jump there. But we're at $6.5 million right now. All other vendors have that we are using, however, we are almost current on. So the numbers that we have are pretty close. This is an SAP only thing. However, that we continue to work on. The lady that does invoices for SAP was spent Monday through yesterday, and she's also coming back the first week of January. So
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question. Is anybody here from SAP? Okay. You are.
You have
Okay,
two
well,
people from
it's not a
SAP in
que-
this
And I
room.
thought so, but here's not my question, but my comment, okay? It's shocking to me that there's an issue with that. You're a big company. Don't you want to be paid? Thank you. Please, Mr. Relative, yeah.
Well, connected with that, that probably worries me more than anything. I've heard if SAP has trouble with invoicing, are you using SAP? Does it work?
Yes.
Matt, you want to take that?
So I think it's fair to say that there's a number of different factors dealing with the issues with the invoices. Some are lack of clarity or discrepancies in the invoices themselves, but there's also the review process and correction process, and all the things that you would like to elaborate.
And we, under my charge, we will only pay if it's 100%. For example, 7 months I held an invoice for $18.35 until they wrote it off, and then we agreed to pay for it. So
I like your style.
So the closing comment I would make to you is the weekly run rate is a better measure of project costs this year and can be used for projecting your cost to completion. What you're getting right now from your financial system simply is just understated. It's too much in arrears. It's not giving you a good picture. Okay? So, I want to revisit the critical success factors very quickly. Those arrows, I guess I would ask the question. I said, is the project really moving forward? We need the team to sit there and jump on that one and say, you bet we are. Is there any chance whatsoever of completing ahead of schedule? There is a bonus thing in their contract for SAP to complete ahead of schedule. I don't see that happening. After 3 1-month delays, will the project drag on some more? Now, we've been through this. They were supposed to, end of October, we were supposed to be ready with the realization bill. Then it was into November. Now it's the end of December. These are the 20 critical success factors that I presented to you over the last year. Those are the ones that I think you need to be paying attention to still. Okay? So let's talk about a couple of them. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of 2 cycles now, 2 events, two tries at trying to go live. And both times we had some issues with making sure we had enough MOA staffing and the right MOA staffing, okay? It's happened twice, let's not do it again. So we gotta sit there and realize that this kind of stuff's happening. There are 12 key subject matter experts working on the project, and 3 of them have left. That's a quarter. That's important. You've got this backfill, everybody agreed to do this backfill, but it does not appear that you have effectively actually used the funding to get the backfill resources. Because what's happening with the delay in the project from October, November, to December, all of a sudden, systems integration testing is now in the first quarter. Like it or not, it was supposed to be in the fourth quarter. And it was intentionally in the fourth quarter so you would not overlap with the first quarter, because the first quarter is when all your financial people are killing themselves, closing the books, getting ready for the, preparing the CAFR, getting ready for the external audit. It's a killer, and 2 cycles running now, it's caused a problem. It's going to happen again. If you know that it's going to happen again, we need to do something about We don't need to sit there and let everybody just say we don't have time, we're overworked, ad nauseum. All those things that are going to happen again. Okay?
What do you do?
Here's the recommendation. Thank you for being a good straight man. You need to have a staffing plan. We've talked about a staffing plan. You need to have one for the first half of 2017. Okay? It's for the muni folks. We need to lay it out for the muni folks. So that we need to do it by individual. Nobody wants to do that detail. I understand that. Right now, and generally speaking, everybody keeps saying, well, we just need 75% of everybody that's associated with the project. That's an easy thing to say. The problem is you don't get it. The problem is you don't get it. They don't respond. They don't show up for 75% of the time. And you're doing it based on averages. We want 75% of all the people involved, as opposed to we need person X, we need person Y. Okay? So it needs to be by person. We need to focus in on what do they have to do to keep the lights on. It's their job. Okay? And then what do they have to do with regard to all the extra work that comes in the first quarter? All right? Once you have that, then you can say, okay, by individual, what are their time requirements now for system integration testing cycle 1, system integration testing cycle 2 and 3, and then, oh, by the way, we've got user acceptance testing also requires a lot of community folks. And then we have preparation for, in terms of final, we got the instruction. Some people are going to be trainers. They have to spend time training. Some people are going to sit in training classes. And like I say, when I see a training curriculum and I see it in the column that says how many people, and it says all, I kind of interpret that as 2,700 people. To me, all is all. They have other designations, which is many. That's not all. Okay? So we need to lay that out, and the team needs to lay that out. And I know they don't want to do the details. But I see no other way that you can actually get the commitment and get everybody to understand what they're going to have to do over the next 6 months.
Mr. Edelson?
I just want to make clear, so there would be an employee somewhere in this building whose job is to do financial stuff, checking invoices, saying, got this check. And they also have, and you're also assigned to do these aspects of SAP. So they have a choice when they come in the day, do I do these SAP things or do I deal with this stack of work here? And they're having trouble balancing that.
Now, and what you don't want to have happen, this happened. We saw this, was it 18 months ago? Where somebody in one of the financial departments decided on their own that they needed to do the SAP work because it was a priority. They said, well, for the next week, we're not paying invoices. I don't think that's a smart move. You don't want to have that happen, right? You need to plan that. You need to say, hey, we're just going to delay, as an organization, we're going to delay paying invoices for a week. That's one thing. But to say we're not paying invoices and to make that decision as the employee doesn't strike me as being appropriate. Okay? Now, once you do the staffing plan, then you find out, oh, this person is overloaded. This person can't possibly do it. Or this person is going to have to put in 10 hours a week overtime. That's when you find that out. Or you get some temporary staffing. I mean, you funded the whole idea of having backfill staffing. You funded it. The money's out there. Okay? Right? So you sit back and say, well, okay, well, how, and then everybody says, well, we don't know how to find them. They're tough to get. You get into all these issues. Well, okay, maybe you can go to your accounting firms and say, you got local accounting firms. I know accounting firms would love to put out contract labor. They would love to do that. You have to offset the fact or figure out, do I have a conflict? Okay. But you can work that out. I mean, I used to work for accounting firms. We put out contract accountants all the time. So, because everybody will say, well, they don't know anything about it. I think your accountants theoretically are trained and qualified in doing accounting work.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Edelson. And more expensive than local employees.
True.
Thank you. So please continue.
Okay. So progress reporting. In April of this year, we talked about some best practices for the reporting to the leadership of the organization, which includes yourself. This is just my perspective on how well that's happening. I don't see anything green up there. Okay? You know, you need to be requesting some information. Like I said earlier, you know, in cases where there's something that you can count, you probably ought to be asking for that information. It worked extremely well when you tracked on how well are we doing with blueprinting. If you recall that, everybody kept talking about how many of them we have to work, how many of them are left, how many in review. Makes everybody accountable. Well, you got the same thing coming. You've got the same thing coming. Let's forget about getting ready for 1223. Let's talk about the cycle testing. It's one thing to say, oh, we're 50% done with cycle testing. No, there are test scripts. There are 40 or 50 test scripts that need to be run. You can count them. You can say, tell me how you're doing on those 40. This one's done, this one's not done. This one still has to be redone. This one's, somebody's programming on this or whatever the case may be. I think you need to be requesting that. Okay? It forces the team to be accountable.
Mr. Dern.
With regards to testing here, I mean, the good news going into testing is it's all automated. You put forth in October a paid for some testing licenses. There was a request for that. So the analytics off of testing will be available for us on that particular area, and it's very detailed. Ken can speak to it if you want any more detail. I don't think it's necessary, but I do feel like the fact that we did go that direction. All the results, the statistics and analytics and everything on every test script, how successful, how many times it was run, all of that stuff will be available, and we'll be able to see that information. So that is a positive.
Thank you. Please continue.
So what can you do? Expect more meaningful progress reporting. When I say expect, that means ask. Right? Expect financial results that are more on a more timely basis. Okay? Get more information about mitigation and planned deviations. Expect more transparency. Expect more evidence of tracking and monitoring. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go looking at all the detail, but to know that it's there. Okay? 2 months ago, we said, you ought to think about what's success, if you recall this page. And then a month ago, we said, what kinds of things might you be able to do to define success? That still has to be done. What are you going to have on July the 2nd? But in terms of getting there, you need to be able to answer these questions. The team needs to be able to tell you what will be ready for test cycle 1, okay, which is the end of next week. They've got to tell you. They should tell you. Alden's got to sign off on that. What will be ready for integration test cycle 2? And that's probably going to be early 2017. Remember, they're 5 weeks long, so you start the last week of December, then by the end of January, in theory, you're ready for test cycle 2. Okay? Which means that you, in your meeting near the end of January, that ought to be a time to say, we got it? How we doing? What will be ready for test cycle 3? Probably the mid-first quarter 2017, and then is there anything that's going to be deferred beyond go live? At some point in time, somebody's going to sit there and start bringing that up. Perfection becomes very difficult to achieve in these things, so you've got to recognize that, that's all. One of the key success factors is to get ready for what's coming. Post-go live support. The thing that we need to recognize is that you are going to be talking about a contract for HANA Enterprise Cloud. That's what HEC means, HANA Enterprise Cloud, and for application management services. Those two things are SAP contracts. You will be looking at those and talking about those and trying to decide whether or not you want to fund them and approve them probably in January, as Alden, I think, said. Okay?
You've already funded them, so don't.
Okay.
And if I might, it's not HANA Enterprise Cloud, that's a license and a database. This is HEC, which is the hosting environment. You said HANA, so.
Oh, did I say HANA? Well, that's what the H in HEC means.
But it's not the licensing, because you had that survey done by Gartner and all that kind of stuff. That is the servers we're talking about and then the support of the system.
And not the software.
It's the infrastructure.
And it has been funded through the
Right,
operating budget.
thank you. Please continue.
So to take care of the entire, take care of the system as you go forward, you also have to recognize that there might be some IT involvement, as well as some future functional, architects and analysts, okay? So the thing we all need to be careful of is to assume, if we assume that all support is outsourced, we need to recognize that's gonna cause some trouble, okay? You don't wanna make that assumption, all right? And the example here is, at the end of this thing, when you get ready to go live, the staff will be trained, right? They'll know how to drive the car, but they probably will not know how to tint the windshield. So that's why you need post-production, post-go-live support. I know for a fact that IT is working that. I know that they are trying to figure out what other organizations have done, but certainly it is something that we urge this organization to move forward with, and for you to support any kind of funding that they might need. And the other thing you'll notice I said is you need to make sure you get them in here early, because for those folks to be effective, you need to have knowledge transfer from the existing consulting team, and they will be disappearing on you. Right? And if you wait until, I've got budgeted resources and I'll bring them in the fourth quarter of 2017, consultants are all gone. So the outlook, I would suggest to you that don't wait until January to find out what Alden decides on the 23rd. Okay? You really don't want to wait until January to find out what the plan of the team is. Okay? So somehow I would suggest you really need to ask Alden to report to you and tell you this is what the deal is. Okay? And then Alden has already mentioned these. I would suggest the same, I just wanted to remind you the same thing. You are going to have to make some contract concurrence for both HEC and AMS. And then based on that run rate with regard to the SAP contract, got to sit there and decide when you're going to run out of funding. So I also suggested to you that if Alden decides we need to let this stretch out a little bit, let SAP continue working on getting ready for systems integration testing, you really ought to have Plan B. You need to know what Plan B is. Okay? People don't want to talk about Plan B, but you really ought to face up to the fact that you may have to go that route. And there are two choices that you have, right? One is let's keep going and shoot for July 2. Okay? Or let's delay it. Let's give ourselves another month. Okay? I would suggest to you, whatever you do, please avoid the slippery slope of delaying this thing at all. I don't think you should do that. Once you start that, you're going to be after you delay 1 month, you're going to find yourself delaying this thing to the next fiscal year. Just see it coming. Don't go there. I recommend that you definitely want to keep going. Definitely target July 2. You got some variables on how you do that, and you can add resources, reduce scope. There's a variety of things that can be done. Team needs to come up with that for you. Okay?
Thank you. I have one request before I ask Alden if you have any comments. And the request is that you provide me something with a memo, okay? The evening of the 23rd or whenever, to just let us know the status. Right, I really would appreciate that. Thank you very much. Do you have any brief comments you guys made, Mr. Thurman?
I think between my report and comments that I've made through here, I'm hoping that everybody has a pretty firm idea where we're at. I want everybody to know we are making really good progress. There's a lot to this system. This thing will be turned on. I'm holding back from any scope reductions because I want to deliver exactly what we're going to do. There are definitely some challenges, and to highlight the fact that the Muni people are working their tails off, and yes, it's probably one of our biggest, my biggest concerns is the Muni's capability of just doing all this work. SAP and the other vendors, they have the capability of bringing on additional resources to help out in areas in order to make dates and so forth. We don't have that capability here. as well as the fact that those people aren't focusing just on SAP, they're focusing on other jobs. So our biggest concern over these next months, which is now a compressed schedule because we don't have any buffer anymore, is the muni staff. And don't forget that the core muni staff has been doing this for 5 years already, many of these people. So that is a legitimate big concern that we have. And but we are going to push every day to get this delivered, and there's no backing down, and we're going to be as aggressive as possible, and then figure out how we end up. But we're going to push every single day to get this done.
Thank you. And before I go to you, Mr. Peterson, just to follow up on the request that I made regarding the memo to us, send that memo directly to us. Don't send it to the clerk's office because that's going to take too much time, okay? Send it directly to us, and you can copy Ms. Foley on that email, okay? So we get it quick. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to go back to something I just happened to think of. It was on page 28. The 12 key subject matter experts working on the project, 3 have left. Are we advertising to try to find people to replace them? What's the progress on that?
So that they all didn't leave it on one day. This is throughout the course of many, many months right now. So many of those, 2 of those 3 have been replaced. But it's, when you have 16 to 20-year employees, the knowledge that they take with them is substantial. And while we have people there but they weren't involved for the 5 years prior to that, they are huge drains on it. And another one just notified this week, that one is my current concern, and so forth. They have been filled, but we'll never be able to get back the knowledge base that went with those employees. I think that's a couple of different factors. One is burnout and all the work that's gone with this, and there have been other opportunities, but it's a combination of things. But we have many more subject matter experts, but there are core 12, mainly in the accounting and a couple in the HR area that are in there. We have 30, 40 total, but there are this core group, and we've lost 3 of those.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Mr.
Thank you.
Steele?
Yeah, I think Zig made some good points, and but I think you also made some good points. To me, the gist of what I got from you is that you're focused, you're dedicated, folks are working hard. I don't want you to get discouraged and throw in the towel, or let your people get discouraged and throw in the towel. We just got to keep after it. It's one of those things that you just got to work through. It's got to be tough for them in terms of their demands.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Papa, did I pronounce your name correct? Park. Mr. Farrar, would you like to make some comments before we end this work session?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur with the conversation and the comments from Zig and Alvin. And I would reiterate that you continue your support for community resources because they are working very, very hard. And they have taken an emotional toll. I am new and I've seen it and I'm experiencing it. So my ask is that you just please keep supporting community resources.